This week in the security news, the Crosswalk is talking to me, man. Don't block my website without due process. Florida is demanding encryption backdoors, attacking boilers and banning HackRF1s. Time to update your Flipper Zero. Using AI to create working exploits. What happens when you combine an RP2350 and an ESP32? Hopefully good hackery things. More evidence that patching is not enough. Auditing the PHP source code. Reading the mega advisories. Threat actors lie about data breaches. You don't say. The data breach that hurts. CISA warns of ransomware. Some can't get a hold of data breaches. Please don't let people take control of your PC over Zoom. And Paul's hot takes on some things we covered last week, the 4chan hack, the CVE program, Microsoft recall. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. ThreatLocker implements a least privilege approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, and zero-day exploits, and ensures protection for your organization 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with respected compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. Coming to you from Purgatory Studios in semi-high definition compliments of Darth Vader himself, this is Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 871, being recorded on Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. I am Paul Asadorian, joined today by Mr. Josh, my pet. Say that my best Rhode Island accent. How about that?
My pet?
It's the moppet.
Oh my God, don't even try a Boston accent, man. You suck at it. But thank you.
It is very different from a Rhode Island accent.
It is, but it's close enough that I just went, no, don't do it. I'm joined by one of my parasites today.
Different from a New York accent as well.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Bill Swearingen is here with us. Bill, welcome.
Hey, Paul. I'm just feeling glad I don't live in Rhode Island today. Thanks for having me.
That's great. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us.
I also am glad I don't live in Rhode Island, but I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
Mr. Sam Bound is here with us.
Greetings. I've never been to Rhode Island. I've heard terrible things about it, though, but anyway.
You should come to the studio. It's a nice place to visit, all right? Now I have to defend Rhode Island. Ms. Mandy Logan is here with us.
I didn't even know Rhode Island was a thing.
It is. You've been here before.
No, I haven't.
You haven't been here?
I've never been
Have
there.
we only been together at conferences?
Yes.
We have.
Yes.
Well, we're going to have to fix that at some point.
Yes.
Of course. Quick announcement before we dig into the news this week. Identiverse 2025 is returning to Las Vegas June 3rd through the 6th. You can hear from 250 plus expert speakers and connect with 3,000 plus identity security professionals across 4 days of keynotes, breakout sessions, and deep dives into the latest identity security trends. You can also take part in hands-on workshops and explore the brand new non-human identity pavilion. Register now and save 25% with the code IDV25-SecurityWeekly at securityweekly.com/IDV2025. If you're not into the identity thing, you can come to RVA Sec. I think, Jeff, you'll be at RVA Sec?
I hope to be at RVA Sec, yes.
I hope you're going to be at it, because I'll be at RVA Sec. I'm speaking on the Linux desktop for security professionals at RVA Sec.
Ask him if you get a +1 ticket. Or I'll have to get a media pass.
That might be. We'll arrange something. Jake Coons is a friend of mine, and Jake and company do a great job running the conference, and I'm excited to go back to Richmond, Virginia, and give a talk on why you should use the Linux desktop. That's right. I got a whole talk.
I'm just going to assume that I have a black badge, just because.
Hell yeah.
I think all people who keynoted should get a black badge.
I keynoted, same.
That's the thing now. We just made it a thing right now.
All
keynoters get a black badge. That's
exactly how I roll into places. I just assume I have a black badge.
I just assume I should be here.
This is how I've gotten in a lot, yes.
That's awesome. Do we'll start with the Crosswalk is talking to me? Because This is hacker shenanigans, Bill.
Yeah.
Bill added a story. I don't know how I missed this one.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. I mean, so like I thought I was the only one tracking this because I brought it up, I think it was last week or the week before or something like that, where we started seeing this rolling out. And then Paul, you hit me with like, Deviant's posting videos, and Sam, you picked it up from there. I mean, like it sounds like there was
Deviant's video is hilarious because he's filming in front of a crosswalk, and
Yeah.
there's just literally random people walking in, and the lady's like, "Oh, excuse me," and he's like, "Oh, you need to push the button. That's fine." And she's to push the button for the crosswalk while he's doing his video. I was like, "Dude, it's
great." So wait. Right, like we've all heard it. Like when you press the button on the crosswalk and it says "wait," wait. Well, a few weeks ago, there was, it started being reported that some of those have been changed in Silicon Valley, specifically kind of around like, the Facebook offices that had been replaced with Mark Zuckerberg's voice saying, something like AI generated whatever, Mark saying whatever. I think then there was
the one with Elon. He's like, "Oh, he's not that bad. He's really sweet." And then you hear Trump's voice in the background going, "Come back to bed, Elon."
Right.
Like, oh my God. Someone has got really creative with the
right. And so like, so as it went on, they became a lot more funny, like more funnier, and they became much more memey and, just all of this. Well, the details are starting to roll out right now on how these crosswalk hacks were occurring. And y'all will be shocked to learn that turns out there was just the company that makes those buttons, the wait buttons. They had an app so that the company itself was Polara, and they had an app on the App Store that you could download that would allow you to connect
that anyone could download.
They were on the App Store for both iOS and Android, that anyone could download and then connect over Bluetooth to the buttons. And Sam, I see you itching to get in on this. Do you got some words you want to say?
No, you've got it. But but it was protected by a secure password. See,
it was.
Oh, it was password protected.
Right. So not everyone could do it because there was a password, which was.
But the default was 1, 2, 3, 4.
Same password as my luggage.
And I'm guessing the ones that got hacked didn't change the password.
Right. Or I mean, like, I have no idea as I didn't, I had not done this anywhere, but, if they were a 4-digit PIN of any sort, they were probably somewhat guessable, would be,
brute forcible.
Right.
Of course,
so
now the app
1, 2, 3, 4 are all zeros would be my guess. Right. Like,
yeah.
But also I think the interesting thing for me is that the app was in the app stores and now it's been pulled from the app stores, but that means whoever has downloaded that app still has it on their phone, which also means we can reverse engineer that app and potentially
There are unofficial repositories of Android apps. I use them all the time. Once it's
so I have one linked in the show notes. So if you wanted to hack, so if you listener want to be a legend and hack your crosswalk buttons, first of all, Paul's Security
Don't say
Week.
You heard it here on the show.
We support you. We will I'm just kidding. We do not I don't get to that. I will get into that in a sec. But I have linked that for at least for the Android, you can go and download the APK and still get this done. But it worked over Bluetooth, right? With a somewhat insecure PIN. Now, I think the real issue, and quite honestly, like Deviant's video is worth watching. Paul, after you linked it, I went and watched it, and Deviant being a long-term friend of probably most of ours on the show. The guy is awesome. He's just a great human being, loves teaching and loves exploring. One of the things that he showed that nobody else I don't think that anybody else has shown is that those buttons are inherently, even without the app, worth exploring. And I thought that was super clever and interesting. And
if you hold it, it gives you is it a special message or something?
So if you hold the button, if you press the button and you get,
it's not really a button. It's like a touch sensor.
Yeah, it's like a touch, right? Yeah. But you know exactly the ones I'm talking about when I say wait, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Those buttons. But if you hold it down, there may be an alternate message that so it could be a different language. It could be. I don't want to ruin it. I suggest you go look at Deviant's video on YouTube and watch it. But I thought that was really interesting. It really goes shows that in the world when we're out and exploring, just try things, press and hold on a button. Right,
hacker shenanigans, man.
Hacker shenanigans.
Great shenanigans. I do want to say that, like, don't do this without permission. Like, yes, I appreciate the hacker shenanigan of it, but it could also, you don't want someone to get hurt because the crosswalk.
That's right. So if you think about the reason why we have it, right? So why do we have the audio, the weight? Why do we have that?
Visually impaired people.
That's right. So that's exactly right, Mandy. So we need to take that in consideration. If we start doing shenanigans and we start changing some of that stuff, while it may be hilarious, and juvenile humor, be aware that there is somebody that it's really on our side, to be honest, that we are potentially impacting, right? So if we had a visually impaired person, they need that audio signal to be able to cross the street carefully, right? So just keep that in mind. So it becomes a lot less funny when that's right. When a visually impaired person becomes injured because you did something stupid, right?
So related but unrelated. Oh, I'm sorry, Mandy, go ahead.
Well, this story, I don't know. I do think it was cool and interesting, but I kind of passed over it because I thought it was simpler. Like, I thought that it was just done at the device itself, and figured it wasn't very complex. Now, my main desire in adjusting that would be if it would create a situation where it drives Bill crazy as he walks down the street.
Right.
Everyone has that song that just drives them
crazy. My God. Can you imagine?
Crazy.
Like, you put an earworm song on it and then you hear it, somebody singing it like next week and you're like, oh, I know where I got that.
I think in Deviant's video, they did have a clip of someone playing one of those annoying songs that you hear on the internet. I couldn't tell you which one it was, but I was like, oh, that's one of the annoying internet
I'm trying to think of Let It Be, the Elsa song.
Let's not. Why would we do that? I know. I thought so too. Yeah. Let it go.
The Elsa song.
Yeah.
So related but unrelated. I was in a city last year. I'm not going to say what city it was, but they had walk signals where you had to push the button to get the audio signal. Otherwise, it would just flash walk, don't walk. And they had a sign at each corner saying, push the button for audio signal only. Think about that.
Did it have Braille underneath it?
Right.
No?
Yeah.
Think about that.
Right. Yeah. It's always like curious when you go to a drive-up ATM and there's Braille on there and like, how? Did they drive here?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I saw that in stickers.
Oh, sorry. Okay, because I have the mobility assistant service animal and he has the mobility harness, the counterbalance harness. And if I'm wearing sunglasses, I love how often people get shocked whenever I get out of the driver's seat. I love it because they're so often.
That is hilarious.
Places, they can't figure out what to do. They don't know what's happening.
So they are definitely telling that story to their friends later, right? Like I saw a blind lady driving a car. That's
or
amazing.
When the repairman comes to the door and he has the notes like, give extra time because she's paralyzed. And then I stood there, one guy, whenever I opened the door, he's like, was there a miracle here?
You should just get out of the car and be like, I can see, it's a miracle. Awesome.
There's the opposite of that, which is the guy that comes to the door and says, hey, I'm the blind man. And the nun is not dressed. But anyway, what do you want the Venetian blinds?
I think I've heard that joke. I think that's a dirty joke.
In the vein of moving along, I think we can group some of our stories together in ridiculous laws and banning things. Seems to be a trend.
This is where I live.
Right?
Yeah.
This will collectively grind our gears, right? Sam, you had one in here that I titled "Don't Block My Website Without Due Process." In this one, this is scary, right?
It's the same one that's been around many times. They keep writing laws. People keep wanting to block websites for various, sometimes good reasons, but they just keep passing a law where someone can just say, take down the website, and they have to take it down. So the latest one is FADPA. I remember there were previous ones before with acronyms SOPA and PIPA.
I remember SOPA. Yep.
And it's the same thing. It means a copyright holder can get a court order to block entire websites without due process. So it's like any other failure of due process.
Like can a copyright owner send a cease and desist, but that doesn't take it down? I think that's what you're saying. Yeah, there's a big difference.
Well, they can. Right? Well, when they send a cease and desist, that doesn't kill the whole website. That says take down this one offending thing, like this one song. And if you do, then it's over. And if you don't, then you can have a court fight. But you don't have to take down the whole website.
Well, and that relates back to, we pre-recorded this, right? So you're going to hear it twice. But I listened to a podcast with a woman, Jordan Harbinger, a woman that wrote the book about taking down Pornhub, because there's a mountain of evidence that they're hosting CSAM materials on there. And the story goes way, way far in depth, even than that, right? I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately. But one of the wins in that battle for the good people is there was a point in time where Pornhub had to take down 80% of its content, or took down 80% of its content.
Wow.
Yeah. And when the stats that she gave was like, there was 56 million pieces of content on Pornhub. And when you go to that today, it's a fraction of that. It's maybe 20 million pieces of content. So it's, it's gone through fits and starts, but
80% of it was CSAM?
No, 80% of it was user-generated content
that didn't get screened, that didn't have the certification,
that isn't verified. Yeah,
2257, which is the one about.
Yes, correct. That was for the porn industry, but it turns out that the internet people didn't have to abide by that, Josh, which is the law that says there must be age verification and consent. Which now I'm like a huge fan of. I'm like, I thought all content went through that process, and this was eye-opening. So speaking of taking down content, this was a huge thing. It still goes on today. The credit card companies got involved, and they kind of went back and forth. They're like, no, we won't do business with Pornhub. Then we're like, oh, well, the advertising revenue, like we'll still do business with them. And then someone found out and was like, no, you need to kill that too. Like anyway.
Well, it's so great. I'd kind of like to. I'd like to get back to with Sam. Like why? Okay, so if we're talking about websites that are piracy sites, or purely piracy sites, or purely moral whatever bombs or some whatever, why don't we want to take that down? Like, what's the negative? Like, why aren't we supporting fad pup?
It's the same issue.
So many years to take it down.
Well, that's right. But the point is, you ought to have some rules, and there ought to be some way to accuse you of breaking the rules, and then have some chance for you to defend yourself.
Wait. Sam, are you defending due process?
Due process. That's it. That's exactly it. I mean,
otherwise, someone aimed of you.
Otherwise, somebody is just the internet dictator saying "off with your head," and there's no appeal.
That's it.
That's not really what we want.
Here's two extremes of that, right? Let's say on my website, I've had to deal with this, right? And it turns out I researched it and I was like, whatever. But I had a presentation in a PDF form on my website, and in one of the slides there was a meme of the 2016 president. No, yeah, I know, right? Of the then 2016 President Trump holding up an executive order, and someone had changed the text to make it a meme and make it funny.
Yeah,
but there was a claim to the copyright of that picture. Therefore, they were it wasn't a cease and desist, but they were trying to basically extort money. And they do this a lot, trying to extort money.
Copyright trolls?
Pretend, but what I found was a lot of them pretend to be representing the copyright holder when in fact they don't even know who the copyright holder is. They're just like, I think this is copyrighted, so let me go extort some money from all these people who have websites that may have one image that I can go after, and maybe I can get $500. And I was like, go pound sand, talk to my lawyer. And usually when you do that, you just, they don't pursue, because it'll cost them more than $500, right? To pursue it. The other extreme of that is non-consensual adult video gets uploaded to a site, and that person has to wait years before that content is removed. And that person, the author of that book gave an example of like one woman who had to wait a really long time, and it impacted her life tremendously, and the whole thing, right? So Yeah, those are the kind of extreme. And so what lawmakers do, and what we're going to see in a lot of the stories we're covering in this vein, is they overreact and just give too much power to one side or the other, right? Like that, there needs to be a balance in this. You can't just give every copyright owner the ability to go behind the scenes and be like, the equivalent of that would be my website would have been taken down entirely. The whole site gone. Provider would have just gone, Paul's website's gone, right?
Yeah, and it reminds me of immigration. For 20 years, we've been battling content moderation, and we seem to be getting nowhere. You would think we would just invent some rules or some system, but we don't seem to be getting anywhere. We just seem to be stuck at zero every time.
Sam, look, you got to understand the scale of the operation is the problem. Every second of every day, 7 hours of content are added to YouTube alone.
And that's just YouTube. Right? Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Can you imagine if you went to every, like Facebook Marketplace is another wretched hive of scum and villainy. As is evidenced by the Darknet Diaries episode with the bicycle stealing thing, right? And if Facebook's answer to that was, we're using AI to moderate content. But what about the person who had mountains of evidence that there's a large criminal syndicate selling stolen goods on your platform? Facebook I don't know what you're talking about.
Here's the problem. You can either but you can either be seen as a common carrier, which means that you're not responsible for the contents of the messages and systems and whatever else on your conduit.
They tried to rescind that law. Too.
Or you can be not a common carrier, in which case you are responsible for every single thing that appears on your website. Can you imagine how Discord would be? Slack?
No, Discord would not be. If that happened, Josh.
Discord would not be. Exactly. Yeah.
No one would use Discord.
You couldn't.
But how is that any different than, I mean, quite honestly, that Pornhub example that you posted. That's an extreme, but
Yeah, but Pornhub is profiting from that.
So
there are actually so like if we put up a Discord, we're not necessarily profiting from the content that gets posted there, right? But then all of a sudden we're responsible for it. Pornhub was actually, there's evidence that they were profiting from CSAM material because they were running ads on those videos and profiting from it. And that's a different violation of law and moral and ethical thing beyond belief. But
they automatically put ads on every video. And it's not like somebody went, oh, it's CSAM. Let's, that it was just automatic ads on everything. However, you when you're doing specifically porn, although some of the anti-porn initiatives that have been done, I love the one, I don't know, 10 years ago, where if there was enough pink in the video, it got flagged. And it's like, hi, have you heard of skin tones? Just checking.
Yeah. Like your video right now would be flagged, Josh, because of your shirt.
My shirt's pink. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, but back to your example, Josh, it's impossible to use just humans to do content moderation today.
Yeah,
with the way technology
there's too much content.
You just can't. There's way too much content to do that. So
God,
you have
can
to rely
you imagine?
on some,
Well, so I don't know. Just bringing it back. So I just wanted to say that I was throwing out a contrarian opinion there, Sam. I was just open to get some just if anybody was thinking, God, Bill sucks.
What's interesting though is in my story about the attacking the boilers.
Well, hold on a second before you move on.
Oh yeah.
If you don't mind, I want to hear your hot take. Given what we just said, you have a hot take about 4chan. Isn't 4chan the exact same thing?
Yeah, it's a wretched hive of scum and villainy. I think there's people that are celebrating that it's off the internet, but also I'm a huge fan of freedom of speech. And I think 4chan relied on that. But the story behind 4chan, so part of my hot take, because I wanted to wrap it up quick, was you got to watch the Netflix documentary on 4chan.
I don't think I've seen it.
It's in my story about 4chan. Hold on. I'm going to find it because I want to read the actual name. So it's called The Antisocial Network, Memes to Mayhem. And there's a link in the show notes to the Netflix title. It was just released, I believe, in March of this year. Was it March of this year or March of last year? Not that long ago. It was 2024, March 2024. I thought it was a pretty cool documentary. I didn't know the story behind 4chan, right? We all remember 4chan for different reasons and different points of internet history, right? Some of which we're not too proud of
for sure
in internet history, right? But the whole story behind it is actually pretty fascinating. And I thought the documentary did a good job of walking you through it. So it's definitely worth a watch. So, but also, I don't know if you covered it last week, they were running a PHP version from 2016.
Yeah, so the whole everything was running from 2016. Like,
well, because I think someone also said the founder left.
Yeah,
I don't know. I saw this in a YouTube comment somewhere. It was like a trailer for the documentary. In a comment saying like the founder retired and is like a cabbage farmer. That's what he said. I don't know if that has any truth to that whatsoever. But it wouldn't. After watching the documentary, it wouldn't surprise me. That person went through a tremendously stressful period in his life.
I thought the founder was those two guys that impersonated an intelligence officer and made all the stuff about Trump that was supposedly leaking about him taking over the world and stuff.
That was QAnon. The
QAnon.
4chan guy, I don't think had any ties to QAnon, because I did watch the QAnon documentary as well.
Yeah.
And I know what you're talking about. There are two individuals that are linked to QAnon. One was like from Japan or something like that, right?
The secret code name like Z or something, I've forgotten.
Z, yeah. Yes. That was not the 4chan.
Q maybe.
Q, yeah.
Wasn't 4chan moot?
4chan was moot, yes. The 4chan founder's handle was moot.
Oh, yeah.
Correct.
Hey,
trivia. Mandy's winning at trivia.
Back to the CSAM thing. I was just thinking a couple of weeks ago, there were 8 arrests made outside of Tampa and international CSAM ring. Did you see that, Sam? Oh, you were shaking your head. I thought maybe you'd seen that.
No, I was in Tampa last week.
Yes, but this happened before you were there, so good job. Glad you weren't.
But that unfortunately that happens all the time. Like, I have friends that work in cybersecurity divisions of law enforcement, and they tend to rotate through those positions where they're going after that type of activity, and it's all too common. I mean, those of us on the show, most of us listening, have probably like crossed paths with people doing that work and already know how common it is, but most people do not know just how common that is.
Well, in this case, a couple of things that I found interesting, and speaking to acquaintances that are, case agents and working on that stuff, was that the ringleader is based in Turkey. And he was obfuscating through multiple layers of VPNs, through fake identities, was passing things through unsuspecting people's bank accounts, all of that. So it was incredibly complex finding him. But what was disgusting, and we know that it goes on all the time, was that the main website where people were purchasing was on the regular web. It was not on the dark web, nothing like that. And for $100, they were getting, I think it was 6.7 terabytes.
Oof.
It's ridiculously disgusting.
Yeah,
it was horrifying, and that's what they said. They said, and that a lot of the stuff that was on this was the worst they had ever seen. And in some ways, I'm almost kind of surprised that our ethical hacking brethren hadn't already taken it down somewhere along the way.
Yeah, there are folks that, thankfully, in our industry that work on that. And assist law enforcement that needs help, because it's just so common. They need help. They need resources.
Because it's so strange to me that they had been working for years to get this website down, this one, and yet you can get demonetized on YouTube like that, one thing.
Right, right. For something. I've been the victim of having our channel taken down with no explanation and having to work to get it reinstated.
Yeah.
Right. So it is kind of an atrocity, Mandy, that certain types of things are so easy to take down, but other things such as CSAM, which we want to just blow off the face of the earth, it can persist for some time.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of people. So I have done some things, to assist the removal of that content. Right? I've done some things, right, and some legally assistive things. Let's just make sure that I'm clear there. And I think that it is okay and easy to get that. There are always going to be exceptions that, hey, this content was out there for so long. But I think what's missing is there's that you need somebody driving, so that website, Mandy, or whatever. I don't have any idea what you're talking about or whatever, but There needs to be somebody that was trying to push to get that down. And what happens is we get a lot of rabble rousers and say, like, I can't believe this content was up there for so long. Well, someone needed to report that content, somebody
and do the work
the work to get it done, right? Like, I don't want that website up either, but I'm not out there searching for them, right? You know what I mean?
I think most hosting providers will take it down.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we, back when I worked for a telco, was reported,
and it did still take years.
Yeah, the problem is like the problem is like when you report it to the cops, what are the cops supposed to do? They're not nerds, like they don't know, right? Like
no.
Well, that's gotten better over the years, Bill, but still, you can run into situations where.
Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, like when I worked for the telco, we would do things to remove that from the internet while it was being removed from the internet, if you know what I mean. So like we could. Yeah.
Right, but and that's what leads to laws that make it easier for folks to take down content, but the devil's in the details in like which content are you taking down and what's the process, right? So if you go to my attacking my landlord's boiler, it actually relates to this in two aspects of this story, which isn't even like the technical aspect of the story is awesome, right? Using a hack RF to figure out what the frequencies are and then capture the actual communications that are being sent to and from the boiler to be able to control the thermostat from all locations in the house or the apartment rather, in using the hack RF1. But then like in the course of that, so I flag this because if you're doing like you will encounter that work if you're doing security research that involves hardware hacking or RF hacking, right? Like I've been there, right? Where you got to
capture communications, you got to intercept. That's right.
And this person did a good job explaining that. But there was two other things in the story that is just astonishing. One is this person. So I believe, and I didn't dig deep into this, but there's a UK law that is not like the US in terms of we just established if I have a Discord server, I'm not responsible for the content that's posted there. In the UK, it seems like you are. And this person, because of even the nature of his post talking about hacking something like this, had to disable comments on his post because he didn't want to be responsible for the content that was posted in the comments, because in the UK, it sounds like you are responsible for that. And I was like, well, he's like, so I've disabled comments. He's like, I don't agree with it. He's like, but something like 18 million pounds is like the maximum fine. He's like, I'm not messing around. I took down the comments, right? The other thing was, he bought a hack RF1 from, I believe, AliExpress. And subsequently, he discovered that can't buy those anymore on AliExpress. If you search for hack RF1 on AliExpress now, you get some weird, I posted the screenshot, Bill, in the chat. You get some weird variation that sort of looks like a hack RF1, but really isn't. I don't know. But like I went back in my order history because I ordered a hack RF1 porta pack with a clear case. Totally fine. Took the latest Mayhem firmware and I've been using it ever since. Great success. I paid $140 for it rather than $400 or $500, which is what they retail for. And I bought it from AliExpress. When I clicked that link in my history, it was like 404 not found. I'm like, okay. So I kind of validated what this person was saying because I didn't want to believe. And so what did he say? Because that AliExpress removed pretty much every listing you could find when searching for hack RF. He says they were getting nabbed at customs in a lot of countries that were getting pissy about importing a Gawi hacking tool. You can tell he's from the UK, right? I love the language. So they just decided to nuke all the listings rather than deal with it.
They're on AliExpress right now.
But are those did you search for something different or
hack RF?
And what came back? Is it really a hack RF or is it some weird device with no case?
Looks like
it has a knob and buttons.
So maybe. I'm also searching, and I
mean, it looks like a hack RF with the not Maelstrom. What the hell's the framework? The firmware.
Mayhem.
Thank you. Not Maelstrom.
Yeah,
I'm not seeing him. I'm seeing him, Josh.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
I saw things that looked like them, but I don't think they were.
I see cases. I see screens.
I mean,
yeah.
Well, it makes sense. The same thing happened to Flipper Zero. I mean, if it's interpreted as a hacking tool, it'll get blocked, and then they'll have a lot of complaints from customers. So I can see why they don't want to sell them anymore.
Right. Yeah. So that's not a hack RF. That says PortaPack H2M, and it does not. That is, if I looked at the circuitry on that, I don't think it would match.
Oh, okay. Valid.
The design.
Okay.
Yeah, PortaPack H2M Signature Edition Portable SDR Software-Defined Radio, 10 megahertz TCXO radio receiver analog GPS assembled for Hack RF.
But also, like $40 is really cheap. Like mine, fully assembled with a case, was $140, and it took the firmware and it's fine. And I got that from sources that like vetted the link that I bought it from.
Yeah.
But my whole thing on that is AliExpress takes it down. I mean, are you stopping crime? No, because criminals are still going to do crime.
Discussion.
What you're stopping is people that want to learn that are on a budget. You're stopping students and people that are on a budget from acquiring the device so they can learn about hacking, because hacking isn't inherently bad. Crime is the thing you're trying to stop, not the learning exercise. That's my frustration with it. Is I would actually recommend people, if you're on a budget, to go buy it from AliExpress, to get the knockoff version, if you will, which can work totally fine. At the higher frequencies, what I'm told, it doesn't work as great. But it's a fraction of the cost. And so if you're wanting to learn about RF hacking, it's like, go buy the less expensive one, because it's accessible to more people, and we want more people learning about these things. And that's the only thing it's doing, is curbing the people who want to learn, in my opinion. I don't know how you folks feel, but I think
I don't know. I mean, like, so, so first of all, I don't have a Hack RF. I would really like one. I've just never bought one. But, like, I've known Osman for years, right? And he was the guy that made the Hack RF. I remember when he announced it, I think it was at ShmooCon, I think is where he announced it. And I think that was real early, Paul, when I was meeting you guys or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know how I feel about, like, the recommendation of buying a knockoff from I don't know. It's one of those things, like, but I think, would I buy a knockoff? Hell yeah, I'd buy a knockoff, but I buy a knockoff of a buddy's thing. I don't know, man. Like,
but I think he open sourced, maybe I'm thinking of the Ubertooth
1, right. Yeah.
But I don't know if Osman open sourced the design of the Hack RF so that Chinese companies could fabricate it and then sell it at a discount.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Right, because you can still go to Hacker Warehouse. Like, what is it retailing now on Hacker Warehouse? Is it $500?
It looks like $350, right? Around $350. Yeah.
Okay.
For just the base, nothing,
But there's another friend of the show, Josh. What's his name? I'm drawing a mental blank now. Hacker Warehouse.
Garrett Gee.
Garrett, yeah, Garrett Gee is a great guy, and I also say you should support Garrett and go pay the $350. But, like, let's say you're a student on a limited budget. It's like, there's an alternative, right? If you're working for a company as a security researcher or a pen tester, like, dude, go support Garrett. Go spend the $350 and go, get the actual gear, because also it's going to work better at those higher frequencies. That's my whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm with you. If you're a student, like, but it doesn't matter. You can't buy them now on AliExpress anyway.
Glad I got mine.
Yeah.
But also, like, the attacking the boiler is a great use case. Like, I was using my Hack RF1 to attack my Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Right? To intercept the communications to my Christmas tree. I'm not causing harm. I'm not, stealing anything. I'm not committing any crimes. Am I violating FCC regulations? Probably not. Probably not. If it's 433 megahertz, I think that's unlicensed anyway. This wasn't. This was 800 something megahertz. But again, you're just capturing and replaying within, the confines of your home. That's hacking, man. That's, doing cool stuff.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we're getting to that point where just the tools are becoming illegal and not the action.
Yes, exactly.
This is the whole open source tooling discussion over and over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes.
Well, I mean, back to the Flipper Zero. Let's say you reverse engineer the app that interacts with the Crosswalks, and then you build an app for the Flipper that transmits Bluetooth and can do it. Right? That's not out of the realm of possibility.
I mean, it's so funny that you keep saying like reverse
We're not suggesting anyone does that, by the way.
Yeah, my guess is that it's so trivial. It's just a file you know what I mean? Like it's probably so trivial.
I agree. That it's probably very trivial.
Yeah.
Also, there's an update for Flipper. The reason I mentioned that is there is a 1.34.
Yeah, I saw that.
Official Flipper firmware, which then gets basically backported into all of the unofficial firmwares. And they've got some NFC improvements, MyFair Classic support, Bluetooth low energy improvements, sub-gigahertz, low frequency RFID, support for new protocols. So I expect that that stuff will get backported into the other firmwares as well, and we'll get better support for some of these RF protocols, which is great. I still like and use my Flipper Zeros for certain things. I like taking them when I travel because it's one-stop shopping, right? Bring my Flipper and it can do a bunch of things. It's my little Swiss Army knife, right?
Yep.
But the feature that's huge, big update in the official Flipper software firmware is the Dolphin has new animations.
Ooh, whoa.
Check out, see your Dolphin doing parkour and more. I so hate the friggin' Dolphin. It was a glorious day when I figured out that some of the firmware had figured out how to remove it, and it doesn't exist in certain unofficial firmwares. Hate the Dolphin.
Seriously? Yeah, just kill the Dolphin already.
I think the whole thing was to make it look like it was a Ponagotchi or Tamagotchi kind of device thing.
I think that's kind of like what I don't really care about I don't hate it, but I don't really care too much about it. But I think that was part of the reason why it became so popular. I mean, like it's now
the Dolphin, the Flipper, right? So they called the Flipper.
I run Momentum on mine. Me too. I'm looking to see.
Momentum has the Dolphin stuff in it. I want to say it was. Rogue Master.
Yeah, I think it was where you could turn
eliminates the Dolphin. It has actually multiple. You can get the one with the Dolphin or without the Dolphin in Rogue Master. Yeah. Still a great tool to have in your arsenal.
Well, I wonder when Momentum is going to be adding it. I'm trying to get to their GitHub right now just to see if
when they're gonna take the upstream and put it into their firmware. Yeah, I didn't check to see where all the different firmwares were on that, but it'll come soon.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right. Oh, what is that? I just saw your T-Pico story.
Oh, yeah. Hey, while we're on hardware stuff. Yeah, so the T-Pico.
Oh, that's so cute. Oh, my God.
Yeah, so the LilyGo has come out with several different models. Some use an RP2040, some use a 2350. There's like 3 different models from LilyGo. I ordered all 3 because I was like, oh, this is new. It's from LilyGo. Basically, like I'm hedging a bet that people are going to make cool firmware for it. But when I get it, I'm going to be like, well, maybe I want to make some cool firmware for it. But the T-Pico 2350, one of the models they have is an RP2350 and an ESP32 on the same board.
Whoa. Nice.
What? Wait. Back up a step. Say that again.
So it's a Raspberry Pi RP2350.
Which is, just for if you're not following, right? Yeah, it's a it's very similar to like an ESP32, right? So it's the
correct.
It's the very, very low powered, but Raspberry Pi produced like small compute
microcontroller.
Device. Yeah.
But they can run Linux. So the Pico 2 has the 2350 on it, but there's some memory constraint where Linux doesn't run as well.
So this was what was powering the DEF CON badge last year. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, that is actually really
the one with all the drama surrounding it. That one.
They're all drama, right? But
even
this
the paper badges bring drama.
They certainly do.
A lot.
You're right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool looking, Paul.
It's like $30, dude.
The touch screen on it, I agree. I bet you that's going to end up being something, right? That somebody's going to make something cool out of that.
Really cool on that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the potentially Flipper Zero killer, right? I did find a data sheet that talked about in one of the models how much RAM they had on each chip, in which ESP32, it's a C6.
16 on the Pico Pro, it's 16 megs flash plus 4 megs. So I'm assuming it's 4 megs of RAM and 16 megs of storage. That's just sorry, there's the RAM. 264 kilobytes or 512 kilobytes. That's
I can't find it. I should have put it in the.
And it's 2.4 gigahertz, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth low energy, and IEEE 802.15.4. What's 802.15.4?
I'm failing at trivia.
If only we had a way to look something like that.
Right.
Someone
to the library. Dewey Decimal all the way.
It sounds like a Dewey Decimal number. It probably is.
It's LRWPAN. So this is, it's Zigbee.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And Thread and such.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically your home automation. Oh, this could be the remote for your home automation. Sorry, that's just sexy.
Yeah, and the 2350 is the RISC-V based processor.
Oh, this is lovely.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, dude,
basically I bought one in anticipation that people are going to make cool hackery firmware.
You're just waiting for the tariffs to go up so you can show it off. Nobody else can.
Right.
Well, that too. Yeah.
So he can smugly say, "Well, I'm glad I got mine," like he did earlier with the Hack RF.
Got mine, man. I spent way too much money before the tariffs kicked in.
Yeah, what's going on with AliExpress with tariffs?
I don't
know.
There's a lot of stuff you can't get or that the price has gone up. Shipments out of Hong Kong have stopped. Some shipments out of China have stopped. If you're going to order anything, do it bloody well soon.
Yeah, do it 2 weeks ago.
The best time to have bought anything from China was several weeks ago because the freight logistics, that's it, it's logistics at large enough scale. The logistics industry is entirely collapsed in another month.
Wow.
And certain container stores are going to have a hard time filling their shelves pretty soon.
Certain
container stores, box stores,
big box stores, or Walmart.
Yeah.
Like it's so just for context, I saw an interesting post. A little off topic, sorry, but in the middle of COVID and the supply chain horror that was COVID, remember that? The worst month.
I try and forget.
So the worst month in terms of supply chain was 50 shipments, 50 large container ships that hold god awful amounts of containers and everything were canceled. Okay, for the worst month of supply chain problems during COVID. Next month there are 80 that got canceled. So,
well, everybody panic.
It's going to be worse than COVID.
Yeah,
for supply chain degradation.
So stock up on your computer chips and that stuff. I guess I don't know. Toilet paper, panic, bullets.
Oh God, alcohol. Hey, alcohol is great trade goods.
Yeah, that's true. I would trade you for alcohol. Yeah.
Alcohol, if you really want to talk prepping, I can, but we'll talk. Anyway, so supply chains are going to get screwed pretty soon. So order what you need to now. Buy it on the used market. There's some great subreddits for home lab sales and things, and I just screwed myself because I'm looking for some small form factors. So
yeah, Paul, that can be your next your next business venture is selling off all the little stuff in the drawers that you have, right? So like,
I know, right?
Yeah, ESPs and your.
No way, man! I'm not parting with it. I didn't buy that much where I can sell it in a store. I bought enough for me.
Yeah,
and I bought enough 3D printing filament to last me quite some time.
Oh shit!
Yeah, I mean there are U.S. manufacturers of 3D printing filament, which I would support, but you find what you like. And
here's the problem. I just said, let me buy one of these just for shits and giggles. They're $43 for the Pico Pro.
Yes.
I just clicked and filled out all the information, and it said, okay, shipping to where you are, because I put my address in so it could tell where I am. Shipping is $40 because of the tax.
$80 for a $40 item, huh?
Yeah.
That must be new because I didn't pay that much in shipping. I only paid like $10 in shipping.
They have Standard Express shipping for $10 and DHL for $40. So I assume the Standard Express it'll show up to you and you have to pay the tax when it shows up.
Oh, you think so? Maybe.
That's my guess. I'll try it.
I don't think so. I don't know. Yeah, to do the $10 one, see what happens.
Fuck it, I'll do it.
So Paul,
do the $40 one, and we'll all laugh at you.
Yeah, actually, do the cheap one, and then we have something to talk about when we find out how it worked. So, Paul, I have a quick question. So, you're speaking at RVA Sec. Is that what I heard?
That's correct.
What is your topic that you're talking about?
The Linux desktop for security professionals.
So, I wanted to talk about my story. Thank you for that. My story number 2, how to stay on Windows 10 instead of installing.
I had a feeling you knew the answer to those questions you just asked me, Bill, and you were teeing something up.
That's right. Yeah.
I've known you long enough that I was like, I'll play along, but I know where Bill is going with this.
Yeah. Well, so like we have for I think probably a month now, we've been talking about the impending doom of Windows 10 going away, and Paul is the evangelist of moving to Linux. And as somebody, just to be very clear, I am, Linux is kind of like my default OS too. I've become a Mac guy over time. Like Mac is really but I default, like Linux or that's kind of where I default to. But the story came out, so over the last couple of months, there's been we keep hearing from the Acidorians of this world that we need to move away from, use this impending doom of Windows 10 to move to the Linux desktop. Cool, good for it. But if in the event that you don't want to do that, my story number 2 talks about how you can, there's a couple different versions of Windows 10 and a few ways of bypassing the compatibility test of the TPM check or whatever to stay on Windows 10. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
You can, but
hold on a second.
You bypass that's
to go to Windows 11.
11.
Right?
You can. There are. So I did, and I will include it in my talk. There are ways to, like you said, Bill, bypass the compatibility checks. Get Windows 11 on hardware that Microsoft says you shouldn't run Windows 11 on. And while you can do that, what I've read is that it's not recommended because bad things could happen. Now I don't know what those bad things are. There might be stuff that you don't care about. It might crash. I don't know. Like I was reading a couple of different things about that. It sounded like not a great path, but a path. Curious to see how it pans out. The ability to stay on Windows 10 would be interesting.
Right. So because
how would you get patches, right? If Microsoft. But there is a way. Go ahead.
Well, go ahead. It sounds like you know.
I was going to say, so you can
roll.
Yeah, I know. We do.
I forget what Windows or Microsoft calls it.
They're called.
There is a
Windows Enterprise Long-Term Servicing Channel (LTSC).
LTSC.
So there's an enterprise program, and I believe there's also a personal program. So as a non-enterprise user, if I'm running Windows 10, I can pay Microsoft $50 a year. I don't know how long that lasts, but for at least 1 year, right? There is another program for personal usage where you can pay and still get updates for Windows 10. That's totally a thing.
That's not the LTSC. They don't do updates.
No. The enterprise is different from the person, but Microsoft does have programs for both user groups, if you will, to continue support in Windows 10. You basically have to pay Microsoft to get continued support. Which I'm like, that's a fact. That's I'm not saying that like, you should come to Linux regardless. I'm like, but if you really like Windows 10 or you're stuck on Windows 10 because of some hardware or software compatibility, there is a path for you. But it means you got to dish out some cash to Microsoft.
So just reading
for the personal one, it wasn't like a terrible amount.
Yeah. So just reading this article, it looks like Massgrave has been updated to crack some of the the ISOs that are out there.
We recommend or condone any illegal activities.
Right. That I'm just saying, it's interesting.
Rufus is one that you can customize your Windows 10.
Right. Well, so Massgrave we've talked about for I think we talked about like there was a big upgrade. I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, where you could. I think they added the Office, crack. Or it's not necessarily a crack. It truly is. They have cracked the registration system of Microsoft, and it's like you are actually getting registered version of the software. You are illegally getting the software, but
but this I like. Windows 10 Enterprise LTSC and Windows 10 IoT Enterprise. I heard people mentioning the Windows 10 IoT Enterprise, and what the article says, Bill, is they're not quite the same as your ordinary consumer edition of Windows 10. They don't include the Windows Store, modern apps. Apart from the Edge browser, they have almost nothing else. No OneDrive, no weather or contact app.
I don't want that shit anyway, dude. Right?
This is the Windows I want. I
That's right.
And so, but like also in my talk, yes, I use Linux as my desktop, but I also keep Windows boxes around. And for the Windows boxes I keep around, this is what I want. Like, I don't want all the fancy features. If I need to run Windows 10, it's for some specific purpose. It's for some compatibility issue. I don't need all the, if you run it as your regular desktop, I think we've talked about this on a previous show, right? Like, you want the App Store, you want the OneDrive for backups and all that stuff. Those are features that benefit you, but different use cases. I'm like, I don't care about those features. I want the,
that's true.
Like,
that's how I
want the like base Windows, like, well, I don't know what
all that stuff is the stuff that we don't want in Windows. But anyway, I
just want the operating system.
I just want the
fancy features.
So I did key up your talk just so I could get my article in here. But I really do think that moving, this might be the time to move to a Linux desktop, right?
That was the whole part. Like, this was the time. I've been toying with this talk for years, Bill. Right, years.
Well, I hope that talk.
Running. But can you give more on why? Nice. Because like this, I mean, there's Windows 11 IoT Enterprise LTSC edition, and if you're saying the Windows 10 IoT Enterprise LTSC edition, you were all for, why wouldn't the Windows 11 also possibly hang?
Hell yeah, Mandy's got a good point. So do you know, Paul, if your talk is going to be streamed, or like, is it going to be on YouTube?
I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's going to be streamed. I do address all of those interesting use cases of why, like, stuff that Microsoft is doing that might be a reason why you want to switch to Linux, right? And I have I'm in the process of building. As I come across things, I've been adding it to the presentation deck, right? And it's not for everyone, right? Like, but we reach a point as to, like, how much do you want to bend and hack Windows just so you can run Windows when you could just run Linux? And your experience, the whole point is, my experiences today are very different from what a lot of people are saying are the reasons why they won't go to Linux, right? So I'll do more social media polling.
I think the problem is that, like, and probably it might be an age thing, Paul. Like, people, our age, whatever. When we tried Linux for the first time as a desktop,
fucking horrific.
It was a nightmare, right? Like,
and I'm right there with you, dude.
Right.
I did the same thing. I experimented with Linux on desktop. I was like, no, I gotta go back to Mac.
Right.
Or I gotta go back. I was Windows and then I went Mac.
Early Linux was not really a desktop.
No. Well, what I'm saying
in those days, we didn't want a desktop.
No, so Jeff, that's exactly right. Right. So like Linux as a server is perfect, but like Paul and I are kind of in this, like, the magic age where, like, oh, maybe I should run this as our desktop. Right. And we tried it and it was a disaster. Right. And then since then, like, it's not my first choice as well. What should I do? Like, I need a new desktop.
Like, so I reached a point where I was like, oh my God, like, Linux on the desktop is basically way too much work than I want to take on. Right. Until I reached a point where I was like, it's at an acceptable level, and I'll make that switch. And I'll talk about it in my talk, like those exact timelines and what I switched to, when I switched to it, why I switched to it, and what my experiences were. And in the past 3 years, it leaps and bounds better. Like, just leaps and bounds.
Man, I remember my path was when Mandrake came out, and I was like, oh my God, this thing is sweet. And then
it was rough, dude. I used to know people that would run like Gen 2 on their desktop.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, not like, oh my God, the work that, props to you for doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people that run BSD on their desktop.
Oh, I know.
Like my social media is I love. Thank you all for all the feedback. Right, like it's amazing all the feedback. I'm like, props to you for. I'm like, tell me about like how that works. Right, so I'm really engaging with the community to collect feedback for my talk.
Well,
so if you have feedback and experiences,
it's got the CD.
By all means, send them to me. I want to read them. I want to incorporate them in my talk. The feedback I've gotten is great.
Well, I would assume if your talk's coming up, when is it?
June.
Oh, okay. So you still have some time.
All right. So I've got Manjaro running on my old
how you like
desktop.
it? Did you do KDE or GNOME?
Did GNOME.
Okay.
And I just installed OBS. And
OBS is, I haven't tried it in a while. It's kind of dicey.
It seems to work okay, although I've just, I've literally, while we've been talking, I spent the last 20 minutes futzing around and realized that the USB-C port I've been trying to plug things into is USB 2, and the stuff I've been trying to plug into it is 3,
here's
so it
the
doesn't
thing.
show up.
Here's the thing, and I'm going to include this in my talk. Oftentimes, because of my previous experience with Linux, when I encounter a problem, I'm like, oh, it's Linux's fault. Yeah. Like, I'm screwed. But what I've uncovered is it's hardware.
It's hardware.
Or it's BIOS, right? I've had to update my BIOS to get around issues, and it wasn't Linux. Or it's just flat out user error. I'm like, why isn't this device showing up? I'm like, oh, I forgot to plug it in. And I really was blaming Linux because Linux historically was so bad with audio devices and all this other stuff. So Jeff, you're holding up a Linux
1997 Slackware.
Oh my!
Still has the
I hate you.
Still has the install.
But like this is a USB-C hub that I plugged into it, and it didn't even see it. And I knew enough to run LSUSB and some other things. And I'm like cursing, like, what the hell? I plugged the individual components in, didn't work. I'm like, I have an old USB-C dock. So I plugged that in, worked perfectly. I'm like, it's USB 2 port.
And one thing I've noticed with USB devices as well is that if I do a kernel update, now I'm not compiling my own kernels, but when I update my operating system and it gives me a new kernel, I got to reboot. If I don't reboot, it's really weird. Like devices just won't show up. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I reboot and everything's fine. And I'm like, oh, so now I've learned. So like the talk is basically also filled with a lot of tips of if you do run Linux on the desktop, here's all the crap that Paul has had to deal with. And here's like the solutions. Like here's your guide to if you apply an update and it updates your kernel or your display drivers, do yourself a favor and reboot. Right. And there's a whole bunch of tips I've learned along the way. I use Linux on all the systems here in the studio, 2 laptops and 2 desktops today. So, and I would never actually, like 5+-year-old Paul would have never dreamed of a day where I was doing that. But here I am.
So I almost hate to ask this question, but how much of what you do on Linux these days is command line?
A lot of it is command line.
There
are some nice graphical utilities. So I'll give you a great example. Like being a Linux nerd, both sysadmin, like coming from Unix and Linux sysadmin and desktop, right? I always use the command line, but now I'm kind of like, there are certain things where a graphical interface is great. So Manjaro settings. So I use Manjaro, right? And Manjaro settings has a kernel option, and you go in there and that's when you manage all your kernels. I actually do that in the graphical interface, right? Because it gives me a nice display where I can see all the kernels that are available to me, which ones are installed, which ones are recommended, which ones are real time, which I'm like, that's not for me. I don't need a real time kernel. I want a regular kernel. Which ones are kind of experimental. I don't want to go to those yet. Like I'll wait for a couple more releases on those, right? And it gives me a graphical interface. And I'm like, okay, I want to install that one. I click, it installs, I reboot, and it loads the new kernel. I'm on 6.13 on all my systems now. And that's the other advice when you run Linux. And Ubuntu, I think, has caught on to this. It's interesting. Ubuntu 25.04, I should say, has been released very recently. And they're adopting really recent Linux kernels and really recent versions of GNOME and Mesa and Wayland. And that was my issue with Ubuntu, is they would kind of lag behind. And if you lag behind, you're going to run into issues. It's one of the reasons why I adopted Manjaro, because I'm like, if I run the latest kernel, man, like things are things are awesome, performant, better support, the whole thing.
So Jeff, to answer your questions, I'm not running Linux on the desktop, but if I were to say, I would say on an average day, I am 80% everything is in the web browser now, and 20% command line is. So 80-20 per day would be kind of my guess of, and really I kind of only run 3 applications, right? It's Discord, a web browser, and a terminal.
I mean, in the old days, back in the 1900s, we wanted to do everything from the command line.
In the old
and we
days,
didn't want any graphical interfaces.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, with both for Bill and Paul, and maybe Josh too, are you using more command line because of your history? Than,
yes,
yeah,
for sure.
Like I think
for sure,
newer users are not going to.
Newer users will have a much better time with the graphical interfaces than you did several years ago, right?
But there's a problem there. The definition of a power user is someone who understands the system that they are using and can use, not necessarily exploit, but can use all of the functionality available to them.
Doesn't matter if it's graphical or command line, right? If you're a power user, you got to understand both.
But most of the function, or much of the functionality in a lot of systems is not in the graphical user interface, because there has to be a workflow and use case and such, and a reason for them to expend the effort.
But that's not
out the graphical user
interface. I mean, think about an iPad, right? Do you need a console there to do everything? I don't know.
I don't know, but
some of it is preference. Some of it's, but
that's true.
Some of it's preference, some of it's usability, and some of it's skill level. I mean, all those factors come into play. My background is different than many, perhaps, or the casual user is probably going to gravitate towards the graphical interface, right? And it's gotten much better. But when I update packages on my system, I want to use the command line. Right. But you can totally use I get a notification in both Ubuntu and Manjaro. Hey, you need to update packages. I'm like, great. I'm going to close that. And I'm going to go to the command line, because I know what the commands are on the command line that help me update my system and do more advanced things. Like recently I had to back revision Docker to the previous version. And I'm like, I don't even want to know how you would do that in the graphical interface. I know what the commands are that it showed me to be like, okay, I'm going to uninstall the current Docker. I'm going to install the previous version of Docker. And then I forget what the command is. I have it in my notes. And I'm going to pin that version of Docker so that when I update my system on the command line in future versions, it keeps that version of Docker, right? Until some bugs flesh out with some software that I'm using that allow me to go to the next version of Docker. So it's just a temporary thing, but the command line allowed me to do that. So I don't know if you want to call that like power user situations or whatever, but the other thing I want to dig into is like, what is a power user? We use that term power user. Like, what does that really mean? Right.
Well, and how many users ever fall into that category? Because I would think a lot of the hardcore people that are represented here probably very often don't do things that would qualify them as power users, especially Bill.
That's true.
But here's the thing.
Listen, I can plug in a USB the first time. It doesn't even take me twice. Boom.
But here's the thing. My talk
takes me 3 times.
Yeah,
My talk is geared towards the security professional, right? Mm-hmm. And I think you should have some.
But that's what I'm saying, Paul. How many security professionals are really power users?
As a security professional, maybe if you're not a power user, but you should have some curiosity and or dabbling in some of these different commands to understand how systems work, right? My talk is not
there's
the Linux desktop for everyone, right?
And it could be an age bias that a power user necessarily needs to be able to know how to do things at the command line, I would think. Can you be a power user and all you're doing is running apps and interfaces and GUIs?
It's something I'm going to dig into. It's a good question. Again, I want to
see a slide on that in your talk, Paul.
You got it. I want to cover the power user thing,
Pretty soon, I think power user is just going to be computers.
But that's before you move on, I do have one stupid question, because I'm reading up on Windows 11 for the first time now as we're talking. And, it requires such a powerful processor.
It's dog slow.
Yeah.
But, well, I guess my question is,
welcome to Vista.
Why, when most everything, I think we were talking about it last week, is available in the cloud anyway, and it's cloud-based Office 365 and stuff, why does an operating system need so much performance power? Yeah.
Because
is it performance or is it features?
Well, that's
it is
I don't
bloatware.
know.
It's bloat.
No,
it's bloat.
But I think some of it is the security features are missing in older processors, right? The further you go back in processors,
I mean,
you're going to miss those great things that Intel has put into the platform that provide security. I think Microsoft's driving factor for going, you need a modern CPU with a modern TPM so that we can provide you the best security possible. And quite frankly, I don't disagree with that. I mean, especially in my day job and where I work, I don't disagree with that. Intel's not going to argue with you on that one as well. Like, I kind of feel bad for Intel when I've talked to them, and I'm like, you guys do a great job of introducing fantastic security features. I'm like, it must be frustrating when people don't fully implement them on their platform, and they don't want to necessarily comment on that or call people out. But I'm like, it's got to be frustrating. They have some of the most talented engineers on the planet that have developed I interviewed Vincent Zimmer, one of the most talented engineers I've ever spoken with on in my life. And I'm like, dude, it's gotta be frustrating. And he's like, yeah, like, we develop these things. He's like, we want people to use them. He's like, but there are pressures where people get, busy, they got deadlines and they don't want to use them. And that is frustrating. So I think that's some of the Microsoft thing is not so much performance, but they want the latest processor features to implement security control, such as secure boot and a whole host of other features on the processor.
It's interesting you say that. I agree with you that there are some security feature sets that are necessary and modern this and processor, TPM, etc. But I'm going to point out that Windows 11 is where they're implementing recall. And I'm just going to say that maybe some of that oomph is for them.
Well, my hot take on recall is we can't trust Windows users that are running recall.
Wait, right? Say that again. What?
So if you're a Windows user, Microsoft reintroduces recall.
Yeah.
As a Windows user, you can opt in or opt out, right? That's kind of how they're pitching it, right? Or maybe you can, maybe you can't. Regardless, if I'm running Linux and I'm communicating with a user who's running Windows with recall, and we're on Signal, and they're screenshotting everything that we're communicating with, you've just thrown all the security and privacy that we had out the window. So I can't trust you as a Windows user with recall. That's the astonishing thing, is that we all need to be on a platform that provides security and privacy, and the recall feature throws that out the window. And that's my concern.
That is an interesting take.
So even though recall is local.
No, recall's not local. Recall collects information locally, then it sends the information to Microsoft.
That's not the way that I understand it. I understand it to be a local LLM that's using the screenshots to, So Sam, the way that you described it, I think it was last week when we were talking about it, is that it's a local LLM that will read over those images and give you that back. And then when it times out, those images are no longer available. It cannot give you that information back.
Well, all I know is Microsoft claims they do not share snapshots or associated data with Microsoft or third parties, nor is it shared between different Windows users on the same device. And
it's not Microsoft, it's threat actors we're worried about who gain access
and
to
the threat actor is somebody who gets physical access to your box and knows your PIN. If they can log into your account, then they can get the recall data. Mm-hmm. So is
that physical, or can you do that remotely, you think, Sam?
Well, if you put malware on it and exploited it while you were logged in,
I agree.
You could probably steal the recall data too.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, but so Mandy, so Paul's point is if I'm running recall and you and I are having a private, I'm running Windows 11 that has recall, and you and I are having a private conversation over Signal, and I have Signal Desktop installed, that content now is in, so you and I are having a private conversation, that content is now in my recall that could potentially
fall into the wrong hands.
So yeah, this is why I love security people. There's edge cases for everything, right? But I'll Paul, if you and I are having a phone conversation, right, I can record that too, right? Like, and
correct.
And so
correct.
like,
right, but the difference is Windows Recall is automatically recording everything.
That's right.
So, in principle, somebody could take a camera and take a photograph of the screen, but they're probably not going to do that. But Recall is totally doing that all the time.
Bad.
Right.
Bad news.
They're dumped at a certain interval. I mean,
every 10 or 15 seconds.
Dumped.
What was it?
Yeah. It's every 10 or 15 seconds it takes a snapshot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's opt-in. It's only on if you turn it on. And I think almost nobody's going to bother turning it on because the end result is you get this ability to search through your old stuff. And how useful is that anyway?
I agree. And, we talked about this last week, Paul, but the default being opt out, right? Like, when you're, the tyranny of default, like nobody's going to go back and turn it on. Like, especially with all of that.
Microsoft will, of course, pop up boxes trying to convince you to turn it on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I want to start digging through some of our other stories. How we use AI to create a working exploit for CVE 2025-32433. Now, this CVE is interesting for a number of reasons. One, it's a security vulnerability in Erlang. Erlang is a very interesting language. I don't know how familiar you folks are, our audiences with Erlang. It has its roots in telecommunications. Some say it stands for Ericsson language or something like that. And so the podcast I listened to from Floss Weekly, great podcast, was talking about how if you wanted to have a telecommunications device that was buried underneath like a parking garage, you would use Erlang as the language to build that because it would just run forever. There's other apps built in Erlang, such as WhatsApp and all kinds of different things. So it's a very interesting language. There is a vulnerability in that implementation in the language in Erlang of SSH. There's a remote code execution vulnerability in SSH that has a CVSS score of 10.0. That's this particular CVE. So then some folks went on the internet like Horizon 3, who's an awesome company, by the way. I follow their blog. I think they produce great research. And they said, hey, this exploit was easy to create. I'm paraphrasing. That's basically was the tweet. And then the author of this article was like, that's interesting. I'm almost positive, 99% positive that the author said, hold my beer. I'm going to go use AI to create an exploit for it, right? Like he totally prefaced that with hold my beer. He writes in his article, he says GPT-4 not only understood the CVE description, but it also figured out what commit introduced the fix, compared that to the older code, found the diff, located the vulnerability, and wrote a proof of concept. Did it work? No. But I used more AI to figure out how to debug it, and he published a working exploit.
Hell yeah!
I mean, that's the TLDR, and I'm like, that is so awesome it got my gears turning about. We could totally use AI to do a lot of patch diffing, which is a laborious process and involves several different tools to be able to do that, right? Like this is so exciting for me. Like in the whole Erlang thing it's just exciting because it exists in telecom gear, WhatsApp, and all kinds of this is exciting. This is so cool.
This is cool. So I'm just kind of reading through as you're describing it here, Paul. Going out and finding the GitHub, the Git commit where they updated that. That's a lot of work, right? That's using computers.
Now he did prompt it, Bill. It wasn't like I read it like that's how he prompted it, but it's not. He prompted it and it created a Python script for him to create the patch diff, and then he uploaded the result of that Python script to the LLM. It was like, tell me where the vulnerability is in this. So there was a little bit more work. Like I I basically sensationalized what he did and he wrote it that way. But he explains in more detail how he did that. But it did create a Python script that created the diff, and then the diff was uploaded, and then was like, hey, based on this diff, like, tell me where the vulnerability is. Like, I think it's here. He was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I think that's the vulnerability too. Like, we're on the same page. Like, go create me an exploit for that. And it was like, here's an exploit. It's like, yeah, that doesn't work. It's like, help me debug this thing, which many of us, myself included, have used AI to be like, hey, like, either what you gave me or what I wrote doesn't work. Like, help me fix it. Like, how do I get around? Oh, okay. And he ended up with a working exploit. Now, is that going to happen 100% of the time? No, but this is a great usage of AI to enable what we do.
Yeah. Ask me what I've used AI for.
What have you used AI for, Jeff?
Not a damn thing.
Nothing.
How do you feel about
Move
that?
on. I feel great.
I feel great.
You know, my dad was this
my
way.
Steph, my prostate is smaller. Like it's amazing not using AI.
Yeah. My dad refused to use a computer till the day he died. He used the slide rule, and he had this same attitude. What is all this crap? Just get rid of it.
Get off my lawn.
That's right.
Okay, I love what Paul was bringing up, and I do think on the patch diff especially, and yet I also want to go back to the prior conversation because we're just going to pass by this poem that Sam wrote in our chat.
That's a famous song.
Is it famous?
Sam wrote a poem?
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Where did Sam write a poem?
No, I didn't. But Three Trolls in a Baggie wrote it. Every OS sucks. It's one of the internet lore songs.
I didn't know it. I thought Sam just wrote this poem in the chat.
I mean, you could extrapolate that.
Sam is the equivalent of AI, so I can understand.
Every programming language sucks. Every operating system sucks. Every web framework sucks. Yeah,
that's right.
Well, we're going to tell the listeners now, every OS wastes your time from the desktop to the lab. Everything since Apple DOS, just a bunch of crap.
Yeah. I mean,
there's a great song.
I don't know, Jeff. I'm on this. I don't know if this is a mission I want to take on. I want to get Jeff using AI. I don't know how to do that. How do we do that? I just showed you when someone used AI to create a working exploit.
Oh, you can trust Clippy. Clippy will pop up and convince him to use it.
You start with recipes.
You can lead a horse to water, Paul, but you can't force it to drink.
If you say its name 3 times, it will show up. Don't do that, Sam.
I liked Clippy.
Oh, good.
Oh, but we didn't.
I don't know why people had an attitude about
Server 2000 being peak Microsoft, and that Clippy was the best ever.
Oh my God, I messed up when we were talking about laws and banning stuff. I missed the Florida law that was mandating encryption backdoors. I don't know how much time we want to spend on this because we've seen this so many times.
Just say boo,
right? Boo, like we've seen this so many times.
Florida.
We go back. The classic example that we've talked about on the show many times, right?
Maybe if Disney was the escrow agent.
No, that's worse.
No, but Jeff, how many times have we mentioned the Clipper chip, right? Like,
Well, how about Kalea?
Yeah.
Salt Typhoon.
Yeah.
Is the new classic. Hey, they had access to every phone conversation across the U.S. for like 2 years, including the government ones.
Is that an encryption backdoor though?
It's a backdoor to the server, which are encrypted communications and to a certain extent encrypted. The GSM is encrypted and so on and so forth. But the Kalea systems are built into the telephony servers, and they used custom malware called Jumbled Path to get into them, and they broke. They broke some kind of encryption. I forget off the top of my head. They broke the
encryption, but breaking the encryption is different from an encryption backdoor.
Okay,
they didn't break it. They didn't break it.
Well, they broke into the back door that has the encryption keys.
But to clarify, to everyone's point, they're not asking for a back door. They're asking for a master key that will unlock everything.
That sounds dangerous and dumb.
Should I get the DCSS song?
I mean, it's not technically a backdoor what they're asking for. The Clipper chip wasn't a backdoor. Key escrow is not a backdoor.
Josh, is Kalea Communications
having access to the master key?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I knew Kalea as something different. I was curious.
So what do you call
from Iceland?
What do you call? I think we're just mixing terms, Jeff. Right? Like
the Commission on Accreditation.
I think
for law enforcement agencies.
If we call having access to the master key or a key a backdoor, do we call it that?
You could probably. I mean, to me, a backdoor is you write, something into the code that you wrote that opens up a port that only you know about with access that only you know about or something. To me, a backdoor is more active, but I'm old.
I think, but no, I get it now. Like key escrow, access to the key, different from backdoor, right?
Yep.
Like granting someone access to the key is not necessarily. It is. So I think in the media, right, it would get labeled as a backdoor.
Correct.
But traditionally, what we understand as a backdoor is what you described, like access to this port, or I give it this secret command, or whatever. Or the backdoors are not secrets. We established that from war games.
Yep.
But but all of this is a bad idea.
So just reading the article here, a Florida bill in draft would require social media companies to provide encryption backdoors for law enforcement to access user accounts. So that sounds like a backdoor to me.
That's a backdoor. However they do it, right? That's essentially letting law enforcement in the back door to snoop on communication.
The social media used by minors. So this is specifically
targeting. It's all to protect the children. But that's a lot of laws are like, oh, we need to protect the children, right? That's how they. That's
social media platforms.
That sounds like I don't care about protecting children when I say
right,
that, but that's how they violate.
Protect your kids by teaching them instead. Like we don't need law enforcement, right? But
fly a plane into a building and all of a sudden we don't have due process.
That's right.
Oh, I said.
But what this is this would provide a mechanism to decrypt end-to-end encryption when a law enforcement obtains a subpoena. So what this would allow is for end-to-end encrypt. So Jeff, you're
go ahead. I'll just
no. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, so this would be providing a essentially there would have to be another user added to an end-to-end encrypted channel, right? And then we would have a key escrow to provide access to that one key around that conversation. So
the backdoor is an extra account.
That's right.
That gets added to all the keys.
That's right.
That has the decrypt.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
But that is a privacy violation.
Okay, so
the reason we do end-to-end encryption is we're under the assumption that if I'm communicating with Bill, we've exchanged keys.
Which of you is
Bill
Alice?
and I are the only ones that can decrypt those communications because of public
absolutely
cryptography.
Not. So you're
protecting your communication in transit.
Correct. Yes.
There's Jeff. Are you Alice or is Paul?
I'm sorry?
Who's Alice? Alice and Bob.
Right, yeah.
But you would only want to encrypt your traffic if you were doing a bad thing, Paul. All the rest of us are happy to have the government read everything we do.
Yeah.
No, well, now you're getting into intent, right? And that's it's interesting. Like, yeah.
Well, I think it is.
We
clear
could do a whole show
that,
just on privacy,
for sure,
encryption, right? We could do a whole show on that.
So if that account were to, if access to that one account. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mandy.
Go ahead, Mandy. No, Mandy's bringing up a great point. Yeah.
How do you build a case against if you never can gain access?
What do you mean?
Yeah, it's the law enforcement problem of how do I collect evidence
like the way that
people who are doing heinous things.
Yeah, the way that you did it in the old days, you did police work.
You went to the courts and you asked for a wiretap, and then you just listened to the phone calls.
So, Bill, how is that not doing police work?
But if they're encrypted, Jeff, how do you get access to the phone calls? If they're
if all of it
there's a simple solution,
digitally based, then
but there's a simple solution. Yeah, you just do away with due process, so the law enforcement doesn't have to prove anything. That solves the problem.
Law enforcement would just be able to listen to whatever and intercept whatever communications, and then determine if we're committing crimes or not.
They should just be able to arrest you without listening to the phone call. That solves the problem.
Sam, can we go to that thing? Remember on Star Trek: The Next Generation, that planet they were on where they would just inject people if they did any tiny infraction of any law?
Oh, the one where Wesley fell while trying to catch the ball. He fell through the garden fence, and God, I'm such a fucking nerd. I know
Hold on, Mandy. Can you say Will Wheaton? Right? Because we gotta
Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton. You gotta pronounce it. Will.
I don't remember that one.
Wheaton.
Yes. That's
the
right.
Oh, how quickly you guys lose me, just like that.
Why, you're not a Star Trek person?
No, none of it.
I don't remember that one.
Oh, Bill.
I know. I'm
I
not a
remember the
good
We're gonna
original
get
nerd.
Jeff
Trek,
using AI. Now we're gonna get Bill
Yeah,
into Star
it's
Trek.
not gonna
Wow,
happen.
we
Chain
got to
him
work
down.
cut out.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen.
Should we start him with the original series or the next generation? No, DS9.
next
I think.
generation. We
Well,
don't need
no.
to
I
worry
think
about the
for me,
original.
you got to get me into Lord of the Rings because I never watched any. Of the
I haven't
Lord of
either.
the
I've never seen
You've
any of those.
never watched The Lord of the Rings?
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, me either.
All of us, we need to get together. We need to all hang out
I've
for
never
a
watched
weekend,
Game of
and we need
Thrones.
to.
I've
like,
never watched that
Yeah.
either.
What is the
Okay.
word? Like culturalize,
Yeah,
introduce each other to different
cultures.
Yeah.
genres.
Yeah, I
and
think we
cultures,
need more.
right?
Maybe more of a
Indoctrination? Is
diverse
that what you're
crowd.
looking for?
We need alcohol, lots of alcohol.
Yeah.
First of all, like number one,
And
Then
some
we
of
need to sit
some of your
down.
dog's weed.
we need to eat that too. I mean, well, that already happened. That's fine.
Mm.
Not sweet. No,
We lost Mandy.
I think it changed your mic, Mandy.
Oh no, it changed her mic back. You need to work your magic. Whatever you did to your mic before.
when
do it
we were
again.
on earlier today, do it again.
While we do that, I want to talk about tales of too many RMMs. What is RMM?
Remote monitoring and management.
Yep.
Is it monitoring management? Monitoring.
Doesn't
monitoring
matter.
and management.
Yeah.
Monitoring management. Okay. So, Huntress has observed incidents where multiple RMM tools were in legitimate use. Like, just in that first statement, I'm like, what? But then they like...
Yes.
So, Bill, this is going to resonate
Oh
with
my
you.
gosh,
Do an incident
yes.
response.
Every IR.
And I'm like, this is Bill's going to like go crazy on this story.
sure.
Because like what Huntress is saying is RMM tools are in multiple tools, legitimate use.
Yep.
So this means like PNC and RDP and
ConnectWise and
ConnectWise,
Ninja and
yes,
Kaseya,
Ninja RMM.
Kaseya and
Tactical RMM,
legitimate
open
use.
source.
Legitimate, like we're talking legitimate usage by the organization or their MSPs or MSSPs.
Yep.
But then the article goes on to say, the other quote I have, which just blew me away, dude. The threat actor moved laterally between endpoints via RDP, but then within minutes installed Chrome Remote Desktop, Rust Desk, and AnyDesk all in rapid succession.
Yep.
Like, so the threat actors are using it equally as much as the defenders are using it. It's like remote access for everyone.
Isn't moving from an endpoint to an endpoint technically up and over and down?
No, it's laterally.
It's lateral.
Yeah.
No, I agree. It's lateral.
Yeah. So I did not read this article, but I got to tell you that this echoes my experience pretty much on every IR that I've been on. Is that I am seeing threat actors, every single one. Threat actors are using RMMs, legitimate RMMs,
like legit
for their
tools.
C2s,
sure.
right? Like. So for their command and control, they
what was the one we used to use back in the Poison Ivy? Was it Poison Ivy?
Gosh, yeah,
was like the not like legitimate.
I don't think that was legitimate, and that was called hacking.
It was not legitimate, but like you totally could use it as a legitimate.
But I worked
back orifice was like you could totally use back orifice as a legitimate
for
RMM.
sure.
I mean, it was literally like an RMM.
Yeah, all of
millions of them.
Yeah, and
you could remotely install it without, and then you could use it to remote control.
So these tools do very similar, right? And so just looking over this, Paul, I probably got to identify the threat actor that they were working, because I also have seen threat actors use multiple RMMs. Gosh, I couldn't get that out there for a second.
They're basically like backdoors, dude. Like they're
but deploying three of them themselves, and in fact, we would come across.
And how are they different from having an extra key? Since you just said backdoor.
They are absolutely useful for supply chain attacks. I don't know why you guys are so down on them.
Yeah, so I think we need to be a little bit less specific on what a backdoor is, right? And just say that it provides access, provides hidden access into whatever system we're talking about. But what I found was, and a lot of times, I will drop into an environment that their own IT teams are using multiple RMMs. Right. And so like I've got TeamViewer and RDP and ConnectWise in there that is legitimate from their IT teams. And then the threat actors are now using, the same tools or maybe a different version of, like an upgraded version of this or whatever. But I agree with Huntress on this. This is they are truly being abused.
But here's my thing, Bill, and I'm going to get your take and everyone else's take on this too. For defenders, here's kind of the list I came up with. You need to agree upon a universal standard for RMM tools, particularly like agree on one and pair that with a PAM, privileged access management, even if that means selecting an MSP that follows your policies. In other words, we're standardizing on
how many acronyms can you slam into one question?
Man,
wow. It's a lot of acronyms, dude. I know. I apologize. But like, I want this tool that I'm going to use to remotely monitor and manage my systems. And I've got this privileged access management system that is going to say, I grant Paul access to these systems so he can administer them for a given period of time. And it's all logged and all that stuff, right? Then tell your EDR to eat like all other RMM tools.
Yeah.
Like basically reading this, I was like, well, if defenders are using multiple tools, attackers are using multiple tools, standardize on one, secure it, lock it down, then tell your EDR, like, eat VNC and all the other tools, especially on critical devices, right? Like if this is on my whatever server, EDR should eat all the rest. Then tie remote access back to a single authenticator. Like I'm not using local accounts. I'm not using one, like a password that I set up. If I'm going to remote access into a system, it's going to authenticate me via Active Directory, and there's going to be some kind of multi-factor, and it's going to be tied to my privileged access management solution.
You need to write that down in a blog post, and we can cover it next week, because that is brilliant. That great advice, right? And that should.
Thank you.
And quite honestly,
I did this off the cuff. Yeah. I did.
Well, no, it's really good, because like that a lot of times that those things that you just said are what I'm doing in IR to detect,
to recommend to people,
and,
right? And like my other thing was, don't allow like the VNC. I installed it and it's a password, and then I gain access to the system. So the single password, unencrypted RMM protocols, right? Don't use those. Then you can go on your network controls and block all other RMM traffic. So not only is your EDR eating things like VNC, because I'm like, I don't use VNC. I'm going to go on my edge devices. I'm like, you need to block all VNC in and out of the environment. That was my solution to this. Bill, what you're saying is that
sounds great.
It's pretty good advice.
Yeah, that sounds great. You know, I think that the most important thing is you need to be that you said there is you need to standardize, and then you need to be using whatever tools you have available to you for looking for the ones that are not authorized, and that's how you go and you start to target. So your EDRs, your web proxies, those kind of things, looking for traffic going to log me in if log me in is not your RMM of choice, right? Like, first of all, have your EDR eat it, and then go after it and figure out why that was being used.
You're actually saying we should look at traffic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That you have to.
Come on, God, man.
Dude.
Yeah,
you know how hard that is to do.
No, it's not really that hard
to do it, dude.
No,
no,
that's the problem.
Dear God, no.
Yeah,
he's absolutely right. We should be looking at egress traffic. You know, it's really funny. 20 years ago, we were talking about egress filtering and looking and examining egress traffic, and we're still fucking talking.
Yeah, you know, so and that will always be the case. We also talk about patching way back then too. But so one of the things I do want to say, you know, especially if you have an MSP.
We started the conversation more like 30 years ago.
Right.
But you youngsters just keep going.
Well, so if you have an MSP or a managed service provider, so this would be like a managed IT team, right? Or you have an MSSP or managed security services provider, like so somebody monitoring your network and those kind of things. If you have those,
I had a BLT for bacon, lettuce, and tomato.
What you need to do is you need to have them very clearly tell you what they are doing and what they are not doing. Right. So you need to know. Great, you've got an EDR deployed everywhere. Is anybody looking at it? Like, you know, so is anybody going into the console and actually reviewing the alerts there? Right? Because there's a lot of assumptions. What companies say is that I have an MSP or a managed service provider, an IT provider that deployed whatever, Huntress, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, whatever. You know, they deployed it.
They call that risk transfer.
Well, but they assume that those companies are monitoring that
doing everything.
Yeah, they're not, and a lot of times they're not.
But also, I think your VPN comes into play in RMM as well.
Oh my gosh, for sure.
Like I've gone through in my own just like personal securing my systems. I've implemented a VPN so that I have to be authenticated to the VPN before I can access any services. Enterprises, small business, all need to do this as well, right? Because I think the way the attackers are getting in is if from the internet you can access an RDP, like, dude, don't do that. There should be no exposed services. You should force them to crack your VPN before they access it. And that doesn't absolve you from doing all the things that I described that Bill agrees with. Like, you should do all those things too. Mm-hmm. But like, there needs to be those layers and those safeguards of it shouldn't be on the internet. So let's take it off the internet. Let's force the attackers.
Is that higher or lower on your hierarchy of just patch everything, Paul?
I think
fundamentals first, patch everything second.
Yeah. I kind of agree with Bill.
Isn't patching a fundamental?
Reduce your exposure and attack surface, then go patch stuff.
Both of those require thought and effort
and personnel.
Dare I say expense?
Patching is
resources.
I'm scared for us in terms of patching because I've seen.
Well, the good news is the states are going to have to fund this soon, and
once we no longer have CVEs, we'll no longer need to patch anything.
That's right. I don't have anything to patch. All of mine are clean.
In fact, I think I am going to stay on Windows 10. Damn it.
The NVIDIA thing is just another thing where like it's an incomplete patch, right?
So I didn't really hear about this, and I know that this was all the, there was quite a bit here, but I didn't really hear. What do you say? The incomplete patch. What happened?
So the patch doesn't fully remediate.
So this is your story number 8, right?
My story number 5, incomplete NVIDIA patch CVE 2024-0132 exposes AI infrastructure, right?
8.
Like this is is it 8? What's 8? 8 was my Windows recall story. My story number 5.
Not according to mine. Anyway, go ahead.
But anyway, so in this case, the patch
refresh. Bill.
Yeah, I'm going to. Yeah, I did, and it changed.
How about that?
They didn't fully fix the vulnerability in the patch, right? This is not all that dissimilar from Avanti going, yeah, we patched this bug, but it wasn't a vulnerability. But then attackers go, oh, we created an exploit for that thing you thought was a bug, but it's really a vulnerability, right? This is the, like we're screwed, dude. Like with patching, either things don't get patched, they don't get patched right, or things are misclassified. Oh, there's a patch for this thing. Yeah, it fixes something, but that was really a vulnerability. Like, oh, sorry about that. Like, I don't know how you can't build a security program based on patching alone, right? And
man cannot live on meat alone.
But also like, while you do need to patch, but it can't be the fundamental thing that I think so many enterprises are just focused on. I just need to patch, right? And patch maybe as soon as I can.
Paul, what is the fundamental thing that all security programs should be based on? I'm honestly quite curious. You said it's not the fundamental thing that your security program should be based on. So I'm curious, what is? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No.
But I think it's a really interesting question.
It is a great question. So the one
we just all assume that we know the answer and we just keep talking about it. That's how this works.
I ask a lot of questions.
It's a great question, Josh. When I have probed those that exploit enterprises for a living, pen testers, right? And I've asked them, what's the hardest enterprise or business that you've ever had to break into? And those are the teams that work really well together.
Communication.
That can, when we do stuff, it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter if it's a patch, if it's a whatever activity we do, they are communicating so well, in observing so well, in a coordinated fashion that we just can't do anything. To me, that's where your program needs to be, right? Is that teamwork, right? Because it's not about how fast can I apply this patch? How fast can I do this other thing or implement this thing or whatever? It's about how fast can we work together to observe events and react. And the hardest companies to break into are those that have that awesome process, communications, and teamwork, that the technical details are almost kind of abstracted from that they just have a process and a teamwork in place that allows them to go, I think someone's attacking us, and what are we doing about it? And that's where we need to be. I think we base too many things on, is this exploited in the wild? Is this a CVSS 8 or above? Is this a patch that we need to apply or not? Like, you're just going to lose every time. The thing that gets you there is, how do we react fast enough and communicate as a team to react fast enough?
I don't think that can be your foundation. I think that can be your aspiration, right? Like, you need a team.
I think for many, it's a pipe dream.
That's right.
Build, and what is the foundation?
Very few organizations do it really well.
Off the cuff, Josh, I don't know, like attack surface minimization, right? Like I would want I would like to put some, right. I know. I feel the same way.
No, but that's a great statement.
Yeah, it's important. Don't get me wrong. But I don't know if it's foundational. I like your point, Paul, about teamwork and communication. I think that's a brilliant one. Maybe did we lose Sam?
Yeah,
but the security team can't be the only folks who are observing and reacting.
Ooh.
You have to enable the entire organization to observe and react. That, to me,
you're getting closer. I wouldn't call it enabling. I would refer to it as a corporate culture. You have to have a culture that
yes, empowerment and culture.
That's a fantastic point.
And it needs to be based on some. I mean, we all started, when it all boils down to it, it's data security. And we can argue what data is these days, but
I agree.
Most companies have something that they don't want to have leaked out to the public or to competitors or whatever. You would be surprised, because I'm constantly surprised how many of my clients, companies across all sorts of verticals, don't really have a good sense of what they have that's valuable that they don't want people to get. So they slap everything in terms of a data classification as company confidential, without any delineation between payroll, executive bonus programs, R&D, competitive intel, whatever it is. There's things that have different value and things that don't. And the wild card is what I used to ask my clients back in the late 1900s when we first started doing this, or I first started doing this. What do you want to, do you want your name showing up on back in those days, we had these things called newspapers, and a popular one was called the New York Times.
Grandpa, tell us about newspapers.
Do you want your company on the, cover of the New York Times as being, a victim of a breach or a compromise? Yeah, I guess the modern day equivalent would be.
Hold on,
do you want Krebs?
What's a newspaper?
Do you want Krebs
what's a newspaper?
What's a newspaper? It's that stuff that you put under the dog in a few hours after it's feeling the effects of the marijuana.
I don't know. I order those from Amazon. They're like, they have a plastic lining underneath them. And the cloth top.
I mean, how do you describe a newspaper to somebody that's never seen it? That's a great question.
Oh my God, I just thought of the saddest question I can think of in non-tragic sense. But Grandpa, what's a book?
But I want to go back to what Jeff was saying. It triggered a thought about OODA loops. Sunil, you was talking about OODA loops, right? I think the best defending teams understand the OODA loop, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Observe, orient, detect, and act, right? And if you can do that faster than attackers, you win. So it doesn't matter if I have something.
Win.
You can win. If I have something that's totally vulnerable, but holy crap, if I can be better at the attackers than observing, orienting myself to be like, what is that? What are they getting into? Attacking them and being like, all right, you know what? Just shut it down. When we were doing CTFs with CCDC, right? The hardest teams to break into were the ones that could do the OODA. They didn't know it at the time, right? But they were the ones that could do the OODA loop the fastest, the ones that could detect, orient themselves, communicate, and act, and be like, I'm just going to take that down.
For
and
the
it might take a point.
For the benefit of the audience, and I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, but what does OODA stand for?
I think I said it. Observe, orient, detect, and act.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's effectively, it's your action.
It's a process.
Who was the Air Force fighter pilot, John?
The reason why it's called a loop is after you've acted, you then observe again, right? You keep going.
You iterate and keep iterating until you finish the.
And that was the thing when we were
you're never finished, Josh.
A live fire exercise.
Task, or you finish the
exercise. Live fire exercise of CCDC was a great kind of test for that, of where enterprise teams need to be. Because, the best teams were just constantly iterating on that. And if they could frustrate the attackers, we go, hey, you got on that system. That's great. We're just going to turn that off. And we're going to do some stuff, and then we're going to turn it back on. And good luck. Right?
So
and constantly cutting off the branch that we were standing on is where they were having great
success.
The
issue that I have with this, and and I don't know if we're wanting to stay on this, but so I still think that all of this is very aspirational. You guys are going into this assuming that there's a team, right? And I've made this mistake so many times in my life too, because I've always worked for a large company that had, I've got a cybersecurity team. How do you so if you were to have a company of 50 people that have outsourced IT, right? They don't even have an IT person. Who's doing this OODA, right? Who's doing it, right?
To be completely honest, Bill, IT has always been outsourced. Again, back in the 1900s, IT was always in the basement, in a building across campus, across town. It was never prime real estate.
But that's what changed, Jeff. When I talk to pen testers, they're like, they're not in the basement anymore. They're collaborating with the rest of the organization. And those that do that are much more difficult in resilient organizations.
And that's where we need to be, we need to be driving to get to.
Somewhere there's a story in there too about CTF's bill and me wanting
But it's not just the relocation of IT or the involvement of the IT, it's the whole organization realizing that they play a role in it.
Bill at some point was like, I don't know Paul really well, but we're in a CTF and Paul wants to fight someone. I got his back.
I'm like, it's
a fun. You recalled that memory, dude. I had forgotten. I had suppressed that memory. You recalled that.
I remember. I didn't. I remember. That's when I was like,
and if you don't do all this stuff,
different kind of OODA loop. Different kind.
That's when I realized, hey, I can pick on Paul a little bit, but once he says, hey, shut up, and I'm like, okay, cool, man, I'm going to shut up.
If you don't do all this stuff, bad things can happen, like breaches. Like I had several stories. If you want to highlight them, Paul.
Wait, before we go to that, I want to say, as much as it pains me, Pi AI agreed with Paul.
Of course it did.
About what?
On what? On what?
Doesn't matter, Bill. They agree with me.
No. About the single most important foundational aspect for security and for a security team.
Dude, that's the most important thing. That's the crux of our whole podcast.
I asked it to sort through all of its technical.
Josh asked the pivotal question. We all paused. Shit! If I don't answer this question right, we all need to retire right now. Sorry. that was a pivotal. No, Josh, don't be sorry. That was a great question.
It said communication is the cornerstone.
There you go.
There
you have it.
Clear, concise, and timely communication is the foundation for a successful cybersecurity or data security team.
Well, you heard it here.
It's not. But note, it's not a technical thing. You could have the most technical people on your team. Right. If they're not collaborating and operating as a team, it means nothing. Right? There's. I feel like Gene Kim's book. Talk about that.
Listen, I disagree with all of you. Right? I completely did. And you know what? We need to move on, but I disagree. You've got an RDP server that's internet facing. I'm glad that you guys can all talk together. Great. How about taking that shit off the internet first, right? And then talk about it.
Or at least take it to a signal chat.
Also, Bill, I love that take. Yeah. You're spot on in that take too. There are certain situations where I get it. Well,
I like Josh. I like Jeff's number
let's
one.
go. What's interesting? We got 6 minutes left. What's most interesting?
Jeff, I liked your number one. U.S. data breach
story.
victim count surges by 26%.
Yep. And basically, we keep losing. What are we doing here?
So
the numbers keep going up and up and up and up.
What I found interesting out of this article is that the number of incidents
Events.
or breaches are going down, but the number of people impacted due to those are going up. Right? I think that is very telling around how companies are data hoarding, right?
But also, threat actors lie.
That's true.
Shocking about the data that they've breached. They add records. They add credit cards to records that don't really exist. I read that article and I was like, I can't believe I never thought about that aspect of when there's a data breach and the threat actors post the data that they're unethical people to begin with, that they would modify the data to like make themselves look better and make the company look bad. I'm like, oh, that makes total sense. It was Penta's partners that posted that article. I'm like, oh, yeah, of course they would lie, right? They would put credit card data in there that isn't valid credit cards. But when we evaluate that data, we're like, oh, there's credit cards associated with all 1.5 million records. Therefore, 1.5 million credit cards leaked. Oh, hold on. 500,000 of those credit cards are totally fake.
But also my story number 4, because I just had a whole list of.
I like your story number 2 because story number 2 because it could megahertz.
Oh.
All right, I like
and I am also a Hertz Gold customer, Jeff, and have been since I got my American Express. And they were like, "Oh, if you use Hertz Gold, you save 5%." And I'm like, I'm all in, and I've used Hertz ever since.
Yep, me too. Except for who rents a car anymore?
Yeah,
I do.
My story number 4.
Bill does if he has to take a road trip and he doesn't want his car to get dirty.
For eating chips in the car somewhere.
I'm hungry and I want to go for a ride. I'm going to rent a car.
I really want some Doritos in a car. Let me go rent one.
My story number 4. A company, Lemonade, reported that they found an exposure. They found a bug that left things.
All right, so hold on. What is this company, Lemonade? Like,
okay, I'm a Lemonade client. Yeah. This irritates me.
What? Oh, hold on. But what is Lemonade?
It's an insurance company.
Is it a drink?
It's an insurance company.
Car
so it has nothing to do with like a refreshing beverage.
No. And they are not refreshing because they just denied Trevor's claims, and I'm irritated with them.
So we know who's behind the Lemonade hack.
The point I'm simply trying to make is they reported it as, we found a problem where all of our data was exposed, but they had no evidence that it had been compromised or stolen. And that happens a lot too in the numbers that get racked up on breaches and number of records stolen and stuff like that. Very often it's something like this, we're like, ooh, we found a problem where everybody could have gotten the data, but we don't know that anybody actually did. Liars figure and figures lie.
With roughly 2 minutes left, just a quick take on the CVE thing.
Do you drop it? Do you shop at Stop and Shop?
But that was no, Jeff, you had the what was I had a funny thing about that too.
You had it in the intro thing.
I did. What was that called? I had a hold on something.
Jeff's number 5.
Jeff's 5?
You said some can't get a hold of data breaches.
Yes. And a hold is the parent company to several other companies that suffered the data breach back in the day.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, the Alberta
Food Lion and
Hannaford,
yeah,
Stop and Shop, Giant, a whole bunch of
Publix. Is Publix?
No, I don't think so. No,
it's not Publix.
Publix is different.
Yeah,
and they got breached again.
They got breached again. Well, breaches don't. No one discriminates when it comes to breaches, right?
That's what I said. Lightning never strikes twice, except for
breaches.
Except for breaches.
100%.
So, yeah,
There's
the
that dude
Crosswalks
that's
are
been hit by lightning like 6 or 7 times, though. You know, like, isn't that wild?
Yeah.
We should get him on the
We
show.
should.
Stop licking, trees or whatever.
Yeah.
Just quickly in the final
CVE update.
CVEs.
Yeah, so we need CVEs. We don't need private industry to influence CVEs because there's already a ton of bias and incentives that are backwards. It's interesting that we use the U.S. federal government to fund the CVE program, although we don't necessarily trust them to fund it and do the right thing. But we need it, right? We've established how and why we need it. My story number 17 is really interesting. Jericho talks about mega advisories.
Jericho's been very vocal lately.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
He came out of
very
his
vocal
squirrel nest or something.
Yeah. Which is, that's, if you follow Jericho before, there's a lot of squirrel
that was an
references.
intentional reference, yes.
So while there are minor discrepancies in the data that Jericho talks about, it's basically like a mega advisory is like, Dell has a platform and it uses open source software, and what he covers is there are 700 vulnerabilities in this update because of supply chain vulnerabilities, 16 of which are in Dell's code, the rest are in open source software. And talks through some of the nuances in that. And Jericho's very vocal about, like, I'm not picking on Dell. I'm not picking on Dell either. I'm actually praising Dell and other vendors like NetApp that produce these advisors that are like, look, we're a big, I put it a lot in my notes. We're a huge, enterprise vendor, and we use open source software. And by the way, we care enough to go apply patches to all of our open source software. Not everyone does that. It's kind of the gist of Jericho's write-up and also my write-up on that, right? Vendors use a lot of open source software, requires updates. Not everyone keeps it up to date, but some people do. The ones that I noticed that are keeping it up to date are Dell and NetApp. Where it kind of, I think the interesting thing here is which of these vulnerabilities matter. You've got 700 vulnerabilities released in one advisory for a specific product. And you're like, well, like what matters? To me, it's two things. It's one, is it a running process? It's one thing to have a vulnerability in a command like ls, right? It's another thing to have a vulnerability in a command that runs your web server, because it's a running process. And the second criteria is it's listening on a port in a socket. So if only there was some way to help us prioritize these vulnerabilities of, yeah, I have 700 vulnerabilities, but which ones are for processes that are actually running and which ones are for ones that are actually listening on a socket? I don't think we have a great means to do that today. I hope we can progress. With all the problems we have with CVE, all the problems with funding and all that other stuff, how do we get to that point?
Do you remember Sergey Bradis? I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I sat in on a webinar today that was H.D. Moore talking about a lot of this very stuff, and his company, which is called
Run
Zero, attempts to do a lot of that.
Todd Beardsley works for them now.
About.
Todd is a great.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
Great guy. Love Todd. Good friend.
I was kind of trolling him a little bit. I hope he's not mad at me because they had the QH chat open.
No. HD and Todd they're fine.
HD
they can take
friggin' awesome.
If there's two people in our industry that can take trolling, it's Todd and HD.
Oh Jesus, yeah, no shit. No, my point is, do you remember Sergey Bradis? We interviewed him months and months and months ago about how malware creators were close to creating a language of malware, like they could predict where malware would erupt. Okay, they could predict where vulnerabilities would erupt that they could build malware to exploit. Okay?
Sure.
What you're talking about is reverse engineering that to find a vulnerability location before the vulnerability actually occurs.
Before the malware can, yes. Where is the highest probability where we can find vulnerabilities? Yes.
That's fascinating. Good. That's brilliant. Well done, sir. I'm impressed.
Because there's too much software, too many lines of code to go, let's find vulnerabilities in everything. I'm like, no, what's running and what's listening on a socket. That's going to be where we find the vulnerabilities that matter the most. So yeah, that's a great point to end on. Hey, thanks everyone for listening and watching to this edition of Paul Security Weekly. We'll see you next time. Over and out.